Hi, I'm Ellie and welcome to my studio in Redcar, which is on the northeast coast of England, and I'm looking out over the beautiful North Sea. You might have found my channel because you bought one of my kits, the ice cream bunting kit, and you maybe need to find a bit more help in how to make them. So these are my ice cream buntings, and so in the kits you can choose either a cream version or a blue speckly version. But you might have just bought the pattern and want to make it from your scraps and do them all multicolours, which I think is going to look just fabulous. If you're quite new to sewing, you might need a little bit of guidance in some of the techniques. So this video tells you about how to use heat and bond paper with a template, how to make bunting, how to attach the bias binding, and it will work for any bunting. You don't even have to have a picture on the front, or you might want to put your own picture on there and make your own designs, or maybe letters and personalize it with your child's name. Or anyway, the world's your oyster. So have a look at my video. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. No question is too simple. Everyone has to start somewhere. So if you need a bit of help and guidance, please don't be afraid to ask. And I hope you find the video helpful. If you do, please be kind enough to like or subscribe to my channel, because all of these things help my business to grow. And I'll hope to see you along the way at a quilt show somewhere. Oh, by the way, that's not a real flamingo. I don't think they'd survive on the northeast coast. It's quite bracing. So the first step, you need to draw around your triangle template. Mine is made out of template plastic. You're going to draw 18 triangles. So you're drawing on the wrong side of the fabric. I'm just using a normal pencil, and with the plain background fabric, it's non-directional, which means you can go upside down and it doesn't look any different. And I find the most effective way of doing bunting, I don't know if you can see this because it's white on white, but basically you just draw them upside down and then you don't really waste much fabric at all. So keep going until you've got your 18 triangles. So your next step is to cut out your triangles, and you can use a rotary cutter or scissors, whichever you feel happy with. It's quite a, I'm going to just go along here, cut the edge. If you're not happy to do this, just do it with your scissors. It will work just fine. There we go. And if you're doing it with scissors, you just cut along the lines. Chop that bit off. There we go. So if you've drawn them all together, you can just cut along the lines here. That's that. Cut the lines to separate the rows of bunting, and then just cut each one out individually. And after you've cut them out, give them a good press, because if they look anything like mine, they'll be quite crumpled by the time you finish ragging everything around. So you've cut out 18 of these triangles. You need to set 9 aside for backing, and then the other 8 are ready for you to applique. So you've got your 9 triangles saved ready. The next thing you're going to need is your fabric scraps. So you need, I've gone for 9 different colours because they're going to be 9 flags, but you could do 2 or 3 the same, but I've just got 9 different ones. I've got about a 5-inch square of each, which is enough for 2 ice cream tops really. So these are for the ice cream top. This, about a fat eighth, is for the cones, and the flakes and the cherries are these. They're just scraps, so really any scraps from your stash would do. But if you've bought the kit from me, then you'll get these. So you need, included in the kit, your ice cream template, which is this, and some paper, a bit like Heat and Bond. That's a brand name, but basically you can draw on it, you can peel the back off, and it's iron on. It'll help you iron on the fabric. And the next stage is to get your ice cream templates onto the paper. You can trace them on. So if you look through this paper, you can just hold the paper over and you can trace them through. So I'm going to do all the cones first because they're out of the same colour fabric. So I'm just going to trace all the cones round onto my paper. So I'm not doing the rest of the ice cream, I'm just doing the cones. But the other thing you could do is you could actually make yourself a template so that you can draw around something if you prefer that to tracing over something. And if you have the kit, what you'll find is a spare piece. It will be square, it won't be like this, a little piece of template plastic. So what you can do, obviously it'll be big enough to do what you want, so put that over the drawing. So you trace round it like that, and then you cut it out. So there's our cone. Don't use your best your best fabric scissors for this. So you cut it out, probably a bit better than I'm doing here. And then you've got a set of templates, so it's easier, and these will keep for ages as well. So cut this out. There we go. So now instead of tracing over our ice cream cone, you can just draw around it like this, and that might be easy. You might find that easier. You could also do it by cutting out the design and tracing it onto cardboard if you don't have template plastic. So there we go. So you need to do 9 of these ice cream bottoms, and I already made myself a set of these. So I've just done each component part. So there are the tops and the cherries. So I chose to do 5 of the ones which have the flake. So these are going to sit on top like that. So I'm going to do 5 of those. So just draw around or trace over your shape, and I'm going to do 4 of the ones that have the cherries. So that's this one. Got a little dimple in the top for the cherry like that. Or if you were tracing them from the template, it would be, so this is the cherry one, so you just put it there, and you don't trace the cherry or the cone, just literally trace the ice cream blob. So that's that. So I'm going to do 4 of those, and then I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do 4 flakes and 4 cherries, and I'm going to leave 1 just as a dollop without anything. So here's the flake shape. So it looks a bit strange, everything all separate, and the cherry is just a circle really, so but I have done a little, so he's going to sit on there, so put him over there. So you need to trace out everything that you need, and I tend to do that first. So you need 9 ice cream bottoms, you need 9 ice cream tops, whether they are the ones for the flake or the ones for the cherry, and you need 9 either flakes or cherries. So, and once you've done that, we're ready to cut them out and put them on the fabric. Okay, so remember that you're ironing onto the wrong side of your fabric. So, and it's worth bearing in mind that if you're doing letters or numbers, you'll need to do them back to front so that they come out the right way. So I'm putting down this side first, which is the slightly gluey side, putting that down there, and then I'm going to use something to protect my iron. You don't have to, but I find you just something to keep the stickiness off your iron just in case. So I'm using this sheet. You can use baking paper, works really well, or just an old bit of scrap cloth. So you're going to have the iron. I have my iron on quite hot. I've got it on 3 spots today. 2 or 3 spots works fine. And you're just going to press over each part of the design, and you're going to maybe hold for about 8 to 10 seconds. And what you're doing is the heat of the iron just releases the glue from the back of the paper onto the fabric. Sorry, my film is wobbling about a bit because I've got my holder on the ironing board. So we'll just go around and press, make sure it's all nicely sealed. There we go. I think that's there we are. I think that should do it. So take our sticky paper off. Let's have a look. Here we are. So they're now stuck onto the back of the fabric. They'll be a bit hot to touch, so let them cool down before you cut them. Here are my shapes. I'm going to cut them out now, actually on the line. And I'm never sure what scissors to use because craft scissors aren't really sharp enough. So I use my second best fabric scissors or some decent scissors that I don't mind too much if they get a little bit blunted, but I don't use my very best ones. So we're going to cut right on the outline or thereabouts. Cut each one out. So that's our ice cream cone ready to go. So he's going to be sitting on your bunting like this. You can already see, perhaps I cut that a bit neat, but you can already see it starting to take shape. We're going to peel the backing off when we're ready, but the next thing to do is find a blob. So I think we'll go for this one. So I'm going to cut this out, and this one I'm going to go with a flake as well. So we'll just cut out one of the flake shapes. Okay. So again, trim this round so you're not sticking and wasting too much of your fabric. Throw those away. Okay. And I think we will go for, let's go for pink. So we'll go for this nice bright pink for our blob, and then we've got this for our flake. So we'll take those over and get those pressed. So it's exactly the same process again. This plain cloth doesn't really have a right or wrong side. So I'm going to put it there. I think that way might be best. and then that leaves me a bit of room in case I decide I want to do another pink one. And then I'm going to do the flake again, just try and place it so you don't use up a good bit of your fabric. I always think it's like when you're little and you learn how to cook cookies out of the pastry, your mum always makes you cut it out economically, and I think it's the same when you're cutting out from fabric. Unless you're fussy cutting, then obviously it's different. You've got to cut a different part of the fabric. But anyway, so we're pressing again 8 to 10 seconds on this one, and then we're going to go onto the flake as well. Also, using some paper like this does help stop your cloth from scorching. This is actually called Iron On. It's from Vliceline, and but as I said again, baking paper will just do just as good a job. What I tend to do, and I should do it on this actually, is write top on one side, because if you end up getting any glue on it, you don't want it sticking to your iron, so you keep one side for downwards and it's got all the manky glue on it if you get any, and the other side nice and pristine. Right, let's see if they've stuck. You can see with this, the heat's made it change colour, but as it cools down, it will go back, and that one's fine. I find that sometimes happens with pink and red cloth for some reason. I'm sure there's a scientific reason behind it. Right, let's go and get these cut out. So here we go, we're going to cut out our... Actually, I probably should cut this out first so that we're not left with any fabric with bits of paper on it. Cut that out first. There we go. Right, so we're cutting through the paper and the cloth right on the outline. There we go. Try and make that little whippy bit. There we are. Throw that away. Oh dear. Honestly. Right. So this is going to sit on the top of our ice cream like this. Perhaps a bit lower down, I think. Like that. And then we've just got our flake to stick in. I hope you can't hear my stomach rumbling. I have had my dinner. Right, so on the drawing, the flake goes in this side, which I think probably looks best. But you could put it this side if you want. Maybe. It's a matter of preference. So that's how our ice cream is going to look on the bunting. So what we need to do next is go and take it over and get it pressed onto the bunting. So let's go and do that. Okay, so the first thing to do is take the paper backing off our shapes. So I've found the best way to do this is to just try and make a little bit of a tear, and then you can find an edge and just peel the edge off from the backing like that, so it comes away, and you'll see it looks sort of shiny on the back, so that's the glue that's come from the paper. So the same with the flake bit. Oops, sometimes it does peel away without that, but I find it's easier to try and make a little tear. So there's the flake, and there's our dollop of ice cream. I don't know what flavour this would be. It's rather bright. So I'm going to find the centre of my bunting, just make a real gentle finger crease there, and I'm going to iron them on bit by bit. So first I'm going to put the cone. So I'm going to just quickly check my placement is okay. Perhaps come down a bit, because bear in mind I've got to stitch the bunting tape onto the top. So yeah, I think that's going to be good. So first I'm going to I'm going to iron the cone, so that goes onto there. And help if I switch my iron on. I think I have cut this one a little bit short, but never mind. It's just so you get the idea. So same process again. We're pressing on for about 8 to 10 seconds, and what we're aiming for is for it to get some sort of a hold, because we're going to sew it on afterwards, but we just want it to hold well enough so that we can sew around it without it moving. Yep, that looks good. Next we're going to go for the ice cream blob, so we'll put that on. Oops, there we go. And again the same, 8 to 10 seconds. Yep, and then finally our flake, milky chocolate. There we go. Right, let's see how that looks. Yep, that's good. So now it's ready for stitching. So what you need to do is make up all 9 of your flags. Okay, the next step is to stitch down, and what I do is I just go quite roughly around the edges on my sewing machine. It depends on the sort of look you want. You might want to do a blanket stitch, but I'm just going for a straight stitch, so let's give it a go. So I'm just going to go around the edges. You can go once or you can go a couple of times, make it look a bit sort of graffiti. I think that's sometimes quite a nice look. But I'm just going for once on this, just to hold it. Or you could hand sew it with nice embroidery floss, that would look quite good. So I'm going to just go around the edge of the flake. If you can see from there, you might be able to see. I'm not looking at what I'm doing now, I've gone over the edge. So we're going round. So once you've sewn on all your ice creams, you need to actually get round to making up the bunting now. So once you've got all your ice creams sewn onto your triangles, you now need to start making them into the actual bunting. So this is where you get your other 9 flags that you've saved. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see. So this is the blank one. So you're going to put these right sides together. Just check there's not too much overlap at the sides. And you can pin or clip them. I'm just going to bob a pin into this one here, just to hold it, and maybe one at the other side. Or you can also use magic clips, which are these things. So I'm going to put a clip on there, so just to hold it in place. And you're going to stitch down this side and back up the other side, and you're going to leave the top open. So when it's finished, this one, as you can see here, I've stitched all the way down here to the bottom, like there, and back up again, but I've left the top open. You're going to use approximately 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I measured mine with my machine foot, but as long as you keep the same seam allowance for all of them, it will be fine. But I've gone for 1/4 of an inch on mine. So you need to sew all your 9 flags up like this. Okay, the next step, you've got all your triangles beautifully sewn together. although we'll ignore that one that I didn't do a brilliant job on. The next thing you need to do is trim off the bottom bit here, because, sorry, this is my waste paper bin, it's a seaside bucket. You're going to trim off the point, because when you turn it round, you want to try and lessen the amount of bulk that's in this bit. So before I sew them, I just cut the point off and I trim a little bit down the side, just a little bit, to just narrow the seam, being really careful not to snip into any of the stitching. I just do the bottom bit, so you can see there it's just lessened it a bit, and I go through all of those and trim that bit off. Once you have trimmed the bulk off the points, the next thing is to turn them the right way around so that they end up like this. So what I find, the best thing to get the point is a pencil with a rubber on the end. So just literally turn them inside out. And then using this, carefully poke out to the point. Just don't push too hard so that you break any of the stitches. You can use a turning tool. I have this one, but sometimes I think they are a little bit pointy. They're good for getting the last little bit done. But what you can use these for is pushing out the edge, so along the seams. They're quite good for that, straightening out the edge. So got one more to do, and then we're ready to press them flat. You'll be pleased to know that we're nearly done. So we've turned this the right way around. Do what you can with your fingers, and then your pencil, make sure you use one with the rubber on the end. It just helps protect going through, and just push the little point out, and there we are. Okay, let's go and get these pressed. So here I am ready to press all my ice cream shapes. I tend to press them from the back, so don't really smudge out the design, and not that that's going to happen. I tend to press them from the back first, and just literally I try and spread them out a little bit with my fingers, and you just flattening the seams down. So I do one at the back, and then the same, spread it out with my fingers along the seam, and just gently press it so it lies nice and flat. So there we go. Do another one. So the same again, we'll start from the back. I'm putting my hand in, spreading it out as far as I can, pushing gently along the seam there to try and flatten it. And we'll do the same with this side. Try and make sure the seam, you go right to the edge of the seam, and then flatten it out carefully. There we go. Starting to take shape now. So we've got all the bunting ironed out now, and there's one last bit before we go to assembling it, and that's, you see these little ears, we're going to need to trim all those off so that it fits snugly inside the bias binding. So I'm just literally going to snip off along the line of the top of the bunting. So put it there, you can see there. So there we are, flattening them down, just snipping off along that top edge there. Sometimes as well, just check if you've got, like I have here, those are not too bad, an uneven back. I am just going to trim that very slightly, trim it down a little bit so that make sure that when we come to stitching it in the bias binding, it's all caught in. So that still looks fine. And these ones are okay. So go through and do all that to your bunting. Okay, now we're at the stage of attaching our bunting to our bias binding. So I have 3 meters here, and this is I think it's about 1 inch wide, I guess. So what I tend to do at the end of the bias binding, I want it to go into a point so that it looks quite, I think this one will be all right actually. So when you're folding it over, it's not too bulky. So I just tend to trim it into a point at the end, because when you sew it down, it's going to be folded in half, and this bit's going to be tucked in, and then you're going to be folding it like that. So I leave a little bit at the end so that you've got room to tie it onto something. And on mine, I'm probably going to leave about 18 inches, which is getting on for 1/2 meter. So we'll cut that end to a point as well. That's cut through. Right, so what we're going to use, I'm going to use clips, but you can use pins as well. So we start about 18 inches in, about here. What you might want to do, rather than putting them on randomly, is alternate your bunting so that you've got a flake, a cherry, a flake, a cherry. And on mine, I've done a middle one because there's 9. I've done a middle one that's just a dollop with neither. So have a look at your colours and see how they're going to go. I think actually I ended up with the cool colours on one side and the warm colours on the other. So I'm going to mix them up a little bit and see if I can get it looking a bit better. I think that I'm happy with that ordering. So let's get to putting them on the bunting now. So you remember that I said I'm going to leave about 18 inches before the first one. So here we are. So I'm going to lay my bunting. Make sure you, has this one got one? Yes. So one of the sides, the edges will be folded in. So make sure the raw edges are going to be on the inside when you've finished. So I usually put the bunting about halfway up the tape like that. And then I'm just going to fold it over. Sorry, I'm wobbling. I've got the thing on my ironing board. I'll move it in a minute. So let me move it so that you're not going dizzy. Okay, I think that's going to be better. So what I've done, I've opened up the binding, made sure the raw edge is on the inside, put my bunting about halfway up, and then I'm folding it over. And I'm using clips, but you could use pins as well. So I'm just folding it over. I'm going to use 3 for each bunting triangle. I'm going to clip it on here, and you'll see there that's then ready. So to move on to the next one, I try to get them evenly spaced, and I don't measure it, but I use my fingers, and I've got quite fat fingers. If you've got smaller fingers, you might want to use more. I generally use 3 fingers. So I'll measure my 3 fingers, and then I'm going to put my next one in here. And it's the same process again, about halfway up, fold it over with your 3 clips or pins. There we go. And then on to the last one. And then work your way along, adding the buntings. once you've done that, check you're happy with the placement and that you've got them in the right order. And then we're down to the last stage now, which is to sew the bunting down. So let's go and do that. What I haven't done, because I've made so many of these, but you might want to if you're new to it, is to actually fold down and clip or pin the bias binding. So the start of it, you're just going to fold the end over and fold it over like that, so that you don't have an open end. So, and then I just double it until I get to where the bunting is. But if you're not sure, you might want to put the odd clip or pin there to help you to hold it level, but I tend to just adjust it as I'm going along. I've got a lot of bad habits. Right, let's get sewing. So I'm just going to use a normal straight stitch, and I'm going to sew as close to the edge of the, once I get onto the flags, I'm going to sew as close to here as I can. But first off, we'll start with the end. So remember to fold the raw end in, fold it in half, and we'll give it a go. Okay. And off we go. So of course I'm starting with the end that I haven't pinned. So this is what I do. I'm just folding it over as I go. Bias binding does fold quite nicely. There we go. So remember we had about 18 inches, half a metre before we got to our first flag. So going along right close to the edge. And here comes our first triangle. So make sure that the corners are tucked in. And as you get, I just remove the clips or pins as you go, making sure it stays in. And this is where I'm going to go as close to the edge of the bias binding as I can, and go a bit steadier if you need to. And there we go. And now just remove each one as I go along. Get up to the last one. Again, make sure it's contained well within the bias binding. That's that, and that's the first one in. So we go over the join, and again, as you approach the next triangle, just make sure that it hasn't slipped out, because if they come out, it's a real pain to try and add them back in afterwards, and it never looks as neat. So we're going to go all the way along doing this. So we're on to our very last one. Get to the end. That's all my triangles sewn in. So I'm going to use the same principle as before. I'm just going to flatten the bunting down, the bias binding down. Make sure it's all stitched up nicely until we get right to the end. And there we go. Right, let's trim the thread. And moment of truth. We check on the back and make sure we've captured every one. I think we have. That's good. Looking hopeful.